The black void of space was silent, but tonight, it felt heavier. The massive alien warship Graltor floated above a shattered colony world, once home to more than 1 million humans. Now it was only dust, smoke, and silence. From the bridge of the ship, the alien commander Vurok stared at the burning planet below. His species, the Dreth, had fought hundreds of battles. But this one felt different. The humans had fought back even when they had no chance. It almost impressed him. Almost. "Commander, last human resistance neutralized," one of his officers said. Vurok nodded slowly. "Good. Send the signal to the fleet. The human colony is finished." But deep beneath the ruined surface, something moved. Inside a half-collapsed bunker, one man was still alive. His name was Captain Elias Kane, an officer of the Terran Defense Force. Blood covered his arm, and his breathing was slow, but his eyes were sharp, burning with something more dangerous than pain, rage. He looked around at the bodies of his team. "You didn't die for nothing," he whispered. "I'll make them remember you." The bunker's radio crackled faintly. Through static, a weak signal came alive, the distress beacon. Elias crawled to it and turned the knob. "This is Captain Kane. Colony 47 has fallen. Dreth forces have killed everyone. I'm the only one left." He paused, his voice turning cold. "If this message reaches command, tell them I'm not surrendering." Above the planet, Commander Vurok gave orders to depart. The Dreth fleet began to move toward the next system. They didn't know, one human still lived. One human who would soon change everything. Elias stood, his body shaking but his mind clear. He knew his weapons were gone. His supplies almost empty. But humans had one weapon that no species ever understood, the will to fight, even when all hope was lost. He found a damaged Dreth rifle beside a fallen enemy. Its technology was strange, but he remembered enough to make it work. "You destroyed my world," he muttered, gripping the weapon. "Now I'll destroy your peace." He left the bunker and walked into the smoking wasteland. The air was thick with ash and firelight. He could still see Dreth drones collecting resources from the dead city. He aimed the rifle carefully, and fired. The plasma bolt hit one drone, exploding it in bright green fire. The others turned, scanning for the attacker. But Elias had already moved. He used the ruins as cover, moving like a ghost through the broken streets. Every shot he took was fast, silent, deadly. Hours passed. Dozens of Dreth soldiers fell. One human, only one, had turned a victory into a nightmare. When the Dreth finally realized what was happening, panic spread. "Who is attacking us?" one shouted. "There are no humans left." But there was one. And he was just getting started. Commander Vurok received the report with disbelief. "Impossible. The colony is destroyed." "Sir, it's not a full army," the officer said nervously. "It's one human." Silence filled the command room. Vurok's eyes narrowed. "One? You mean a survivor?" "Yes, sir. But he's taking down our patrols, our drones, even an outpost. Alone." For the first time, Vurok felt something unusual, unease. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Elias found a small Dreth ship that had crashed during the battle. He tore open the hatch, coughing through smoke, and found what he was looking for, the communication console. He smiled weakly. "Let's send them a message." He powered the device and began to record, his voice steady and cold. "This is Captain Elias Kane of the Terran Defense Force. You thought you ended us. You thought humanity would kneel." He leaned closer to the camera, eyes blazing. "You just made the biggest mistake in the galaxy." He sent the message on all Dreth channels. Across the fleet, alien officers froze as the transmission played, showing the blood-covered human, still alive, still fighting. Vurok clenched his fists. "Find him," he growled. "Find him and end this." But it was too late. The legend of one human had already begun. Far away, in the human command center, the distress beacon finally reached Terran space. A young operator opened the transmission and gasped. "Sir, you need to see this." The hologram flickered to life, showing Elias's face, eyes full of fury and fire. And in that moment, humanity knew, one of their own was still alive. And the galaxy would soon learn why you never, ever cross humanity. The message of Captain Elias Kane spread like wildfire through Dreth communication lines. Every ship, every outpost, every commander had seen it. One human survivor, standing in blood and smoke, staring straight into their eyes through the screen. The Dreth didn't understand humans. They had fought many races, strong, smart, even fearless, but humans were different. They didn't stop. Even when broken, they fought harder. And now, because of one man, the Dreth were starting to feel something they never had before. Fear. Commander Vurok stood in front of the holographic map, watching red dots blink out one by one. Patrols destroyed, small ships missing, ground units gone silent. "He's one man," Vurok hissed. "How is this possible?" "Sir," said a nervous officer, "our ground units report traps, ambushes, explosions. He knows our patterns. He's using our own weapons against us." Vurok's claws dug into the console. "Then he dies today. Send the hunter drones." Down on the planet, Elias was building something from the wreckage: traps, decoys, and makeshift explosives. He had no army, no support. Just broken alien tech and pure human determination. He worked with bleeding hands, muttering to himself. "You wanted to erase us," he whispered. "Then I'll erase you, one ship at a time." When night came, the sky glowed green with Dreth ships searching for him. Hunter drones, fast, intelligent, merciless, swarmed the surface. But Elias had planned for this. He waited inside the ruins of a Dreth outpost, eyes fixed on the blinking scanner in his hand. As the drones came close, he pressed a button. The ground erupted. 3 drones exploded instantly, metal and plasma scattering across the dark sky. Elias grabbed his stolen rifle and fired again, hitting another drone midair. The explosion lit his face. Tired, dirty, but alive. The remaining drones adjusted their formation, searching for movement. Elias ran, sliding behind broken metal walls, breathing hard. A plasma beam hit near his leg, burning the ground. He rolled to the side and threw a grenade made from Dreth fuel cells. The explosion shook the ruins. When the dust settled, the drones were gone. He exhaled slowly. "That's 5 down," he muttered. 200 to go. In orbit, Vurok watched the feed from the last drone before it was destroyed. He's using strategy. He's not just surviving, he's winning. "Sir," another officer said, voice trembling. "Should we retreat?" "Retreat," Vurok growled. "From one human. Do you think I fear this creature?" But in his mind, doubt had already started to grow. Elias, meanwhile, finally found something that made him stop: a Dreth command pod half buried in the sand. Inside was a navigation unit, still glowing. It showed the fleet's next target, Terra Prime, the human homeworld. His chest tightened. They were planning to attack Earth next. He clenched his fists. "Not while I'm breathing." He knew he couldn't stop an entire fleet alone. But he could send a warning. The damaged Dreth communication unit he'd repaired earlier might have just enough power left to send one message into deep space. He dragged it out of the wreckage, set it up, and powered it on. Sparks flew. The device hummed weakly. "Come on," he said, hitting the side. "Just one more time." The screen flickered to life. "This is Captain Elias Kane," he said, voice steady despite the pain. "If anyone hears this, the Dreth are heading to Earth. They think they can break humanity." He looked directly into the lens. "Make them regret it." He sent the transmission, then collapsed beside the console, breathing heavily. His body was failing. His armor was cracked. But his eyes were still full of fire. In human space, the signal reached the Terran command ship Resolute. The crew gathered around the console as the broken message replayed. The admiral stood in silence, fists clenched. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're bringing him home. And we're bringing hell with us." Back on the Dreth flagship, Vurock received a new report. "Commander," said his officer quietly, "the humans have responded. Multiple fleets have left Terra Prime. They're coming." Vurock's eyes widened. "Already? That's impossible." "No, sir," the officer said. "They're faster than expected. They're angry." Vurock turned toward the window, staring into the stars. Somewhere out there, hundreds of human warships were on their way, all because of one survivor. Down below, Elias looked at the night sky. He could see faint glimmers, ships, maybe rescue, maybe war. He smiled weakly. "That's it," he whispered. "Now they'll know." He loaded his rifle one more time and stepped into the darkness. The war for humanity had begun. The stars burned quietly above the ruined colony world. Beneath them, Captain Elias Kane walked through the wreckage, a lone shadow surrounded by the bones of war. His uniform was torn, his face bruised, but his steps were steady. Every Dreth patrol that came looking for him never returned. For the Dreth, this was no longer a war. It was a hunt, and their prey had become the hunter. High above the planet, Commander Vurock slammed his claws against the console. "He's one man," he shouted. "Why can't any of you stop him?" The officer beside him trembled. "Sir, he knows our systems. He uses our codes to jam our scanners. He attacks only when we are weakest." "Then make him weak," Vurock roared. "Burn the surface. Leave nothing alive." Moments later, Dreth warships turned their cannons toward the planet. Fire rained down from the sky, blinding light tearing through the ruins. Cities already destroyed were burned again. The air turned to smoke and flame. But beneath it all, Elias was already moving. He had hidden deep inside an old transport tunnel before the bombardment started. The ground shook like thunder above him, dust falling from the cracked ceiling. He gritted his teeth. You can't kill what refuses to die. When the bombardment stopped, the world was silent again. Elias climbed out, coughing. Around him, everything was ash. But in that silence, he found what he was looking for: a fallen Dreth pilot, still strapped in a small fighter. The craft was damaged, but maybe, just maybe, it could fly. He pulled the pilot's body out and climbed inside. The controls glowed with alien symbols, but Elias had studied Dreth tech for years. He tapped a few keys, rerouted power, and smiled as the engine hummed weakly. "Let's see how you like it," he muttered. The fighter lifted slowly into the air, shaking, fire still glowing below. Elias turned toward the massive Dreth fleet orbiting above. Hundreds of ships, shining like cold monsters in the dark. He wasn't afraid. He was angry. He activated the ship's weapon system. The screen flickered, showing a single missile still armed. One missile, all he had. But maybe that was enough. He set a course toward the fleet. The small ship moved fast, radar silent. He guided it straight toward the largest Dreth vessel, Commander Vurock's flagship. As he flew, he pressed the comm switch. "This is Captain Elias Kane," he said into the open Dreth channel. "You came to my world. You burned everything. You killed my people. Now it's your turn to burn." On Vurock's bridge, alarms screamed. "Commander! An unauthorized craft is heading straight for us." "Destroy it!" Vurock shouted. But the human ship was small. Too fast. The Dreth guns missed again and again. Elias smiled grimly. "Missed me." He armed the missile, locked the target, and whispered, "For Earth." The missile streaked across space like a falling star and hit the Dreth flagship directly in its power core. The explosion ripped through the ship, fire spreading across its hull. Hundreds of Dreth soldiers screamed as the vessel shook violently. Vurock held onto the command table as the bridge filled with smoke. "Find him!" he roared. "Find that human!" But Elias was already gone, the shockwave pushing his small ship spinning away into open space. His vision blurred, alarms screamed inside the cockpit. The ship's power failed, and he drifted into darkness. Hours passed. Maybe more. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw distant lights. Not Dreth ships, but something else. Blue lights. Human ships. The Terran fleet had arrived. The lead ship, TDS Resolute, picked up a weak signal. "Admiral," the officer said. "We've found him." The admiral looked at the screen, seeing a small Dreth craft drifting near the ruined planet. "Bring him aboard." When they pulled Elias from the wreckage, he was barely conscious. His armor was burned, his hands shaking. But when he opened his eyes and saw the Terran flag on the wall, he smiled faintly. "Took you long enough." The admiral leaned over him. "You started something out there, Captain. The whole galaxy saw your message. The Dreth are afraid. Humanity stands because of you." Elias tried to sit up. "Don't thank me yet," he said, voice weak. "They're not finished. Vurox's still alive. He'll come back. Stronger." The admiral nodded grimly. "Then so will we." Across the fleet, human soldiers prepared for war. Engineers worked around the clock, arming ships, loading weapons, replaying the footage of Elias's stand. It spread through the ranks like fire, one man's fight becoming the symbol of all humanity. In the shadows of deep space, the damaged Dreth fleet regrouped. On a medical pod, Commander Vurox stood before a shattered window, his ship still burning. His eyes glowed with fury. "He destroyed my command ship," he growled. "One human." "Orders, sir?" his officer asked carefully. Vurox turned slowly. "We're going to Earth. If the humans want war, we'll give them extinction." Far away, on the Resolute, Elias stood by the viewing deck, staring at the stars. His body ached, but his spirit didn't break. He saw the distant flicker of Dreth ships reforming in the darkness. He whispered, "Let them come." The universe was about to learn what happened when humanity fought back. The vast black sea of space was no longer quiet. It was alive with movement, energy, and purpose. The Terran fleet, hundreds of ships, from small frigates to massive battleships, was assembling near the edge of the ruined colony world. Their mission was clear: take the war to the Dreth. On board the TDS Resolute, Captain Elias Kane stood on the bridge. His body was still wrapped in medical bandages, but his eyes burned with determination. Around him, officers moved quickly, checking weapons, shields, and communication systems. "Admiral," said one officer, "Dreth forces are regrouping near Sector 9. Their main fleet is twice our size." The admiral turned slowly. "Let them come. We've faced worse and survived." Then he looked at Elias. "Captain Kane, you started this. The men are looking to you. They think you're a hero." Elias gave a faint smile. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I'm just the man who's angry enough to finish this." The admiral nodded. "Good. Because we're about to make history." Far away, in the cold silence of Dreth space, Commander Vurox's ship, the Scourge of Suns, drifted at the center of a massive fleet. Repairs were almost complete, but his anger was not. The scar across his face still burned from the explosion Elias caused. He stood before the holographic map showing human fleets gathering. "So, they send their armadas," he hissed. "Let them. Humanity has spirit, but spirit dies like everything else." One of his lieutenants approached carefully. "Sir, the human message has spread across the galaxy. Other species are watching. Some even call the human the ghost of fire." Vurox's expression hardened. "Then we will burn their ghost to ashes. Prepare the full assault. Target Earth." Back on the Resolute, Elias sat alone in the observation bay, staring at the stars. His hand rested on the cold glass. Behind him, the hum of engines filled the silence. He thought of the colony, of the people he'd lost. Friends. Family. Faces he'd never see again. "This isn't revenge," he whispered to himself. "This is justice." A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Sir. It was Lieutenant Arya Holt, one of the ship's engineers. She had been the one who helped repair the captured Dreth technology that saved Elias's life. Command wants you in the war room, she said. They're ready for your input on the strike plan. Elias nodded and followed her. Inside the war room, a giant hologram of the galaxy filled the air. Red dots marked Dreth fleets, blue dots marked human ships. The largest red cluster hovered dangerously close to Earth's coordinates. The Dreth are faster, said one strategist. If they reach Earth first, we'll be defending, not attacking. Elias stepped closer. Then we don't wait for them to reach Earth. We meet them halfway, and we hit first. The Admiral raised an eyebrow. That's a suicide plan, Captain. Elias shook his head. No, sir. It's a message. The Dreth think we hide behind our planets. They think we're weak. We show them humanity doesn't run, we charge. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, the Admiral smiled. Prepare the fleet. Hours later, the Resolute moved out with hundreds of Terran warships following. Massive engines roared to life, blue light cutting through the darkness. Every soldier aboard knew the name Elias Kane. Every pilot carried his words in their mind, never cross humanity. The two fleets met in the shadow of a dying star. The Dreth ships appeared first, black, spiked, monstrous. Energy cannons glowed bright green, ready to fire. Behind them, Commander Vurox stood on his bridge, his cold eyes fixed on the distant blue shapes of human ships. End them, he ordered. The first wave of plasma fire lit up the void. Human ships dodged, shields flaring. Missiles streaked across the darkness like falling stars. The battle had begun. Elias stood at the command screen beside the Admiral, issuing orders calmly. Squad Delta, flank right. Omega Team, cut their communication relay. Keep pressure. Don't give them time to think. Outside, the space between fleets became a storm of explosions. Human pilots shouted over comms, ships spinning through debris. A Dreth cruiser exploded, breaking apart in bright fire. But for every Dreth ship that fell, two more appeared. The Resolute shook violently as a Dreth beam hit its side. Shields at 40%, shouted an officer. Elias grabbed the console. Lock onto their flagship. I want Vurox's ship. But sir, do it. The Resolute turned sharply, engines burning, flying straight toward the Scourge of Suns. The massive Dreth warship towered ahead like a dark mountain. Vurox saw it coming. He's here, he growled. The human lives. Focus all fire on that ship. Green plasma blasts slammed into the Resolute. The hull screamed under pressure, metal tearing. Sparks flew across the bridge. Sir, we can't take another hit. Elias steadied himself. Then we don't get hit again. He grabbed the manual control. The Resolute swerved downward, sliding between Dreth destroyers, launching torpedoes in every direction. Explosions filled the void. Now! Elias shouted. Fire everything we've got. The Resolute unleashed a full barrage. Missiles, plasma, and railguns struck the Scourge of Suns head-on. The Dreth shields flickered, then failed. Fire ripped through the alien hull. Vurox's ship began to fall apart, its engines exploding one by one. On the human bridge, cheers filled the air. But Elias didn't celebrate. He watched the burning ship and whispered, "This isn't over." As the Scourge of Suns broke apart, Vurox was pulled into an escape pod. He slammed his fist against the console, eyes glowing with hate. You can destroy my ship, human, but you will never destroy me. The pod shot into deep space, vanishing into the dark. Elias watched the wreckage of the Dreth fleet drift away. The first major human victory was real, but he knew it was only the beginning. He turned to the Admiral. He's still alive. And he'll be back. The Admiral nodded slowly. Then so will we. Elias looked out the window at the burning horizon of stars. Then let's finish what we started. The battle was over, but the silence afterward was not peace, it was warning. The wreckage of hundreds of ships floated through the void, glowing faintly against the light of a dying star. Broken Dreth warships drifted alongside shattered human vessels. The war had left its mark on both sides. On board the TDS Resolute, alarms were silent for the first time in days. The crew worked quietly, repairing damaged systems. Engineers moved like ghosts through smoke-filled corridors. Captain Elias Kane stood on the viewing deck, his reflection shimmering in the glass. His uniform was torn again, blood on his sleeve, but his eyes stayed sharp. Lieutenant Arya Holt joined him. "We did it," she said softly. "Vurok's fleet is destroyed. Humanity finally won." Elias didn't look away from the stars. "No," he said. "We survived." "That's not the same thing." Arya frowned. "You think he's still alive, don't you?" Elias nodded slowly. "Vurok isn't the kind to die quietly. He'll come back, with something worse." Far across the galaxy, in the Dreth border systems, Commander Vurok stood inside a secret outpost. His body was scarred, his armor cracked, but his hatred burned brighter than ever. Around him, a handful of surviving Dreth officers kneeled. "You saw what humanity did," Vurok said, his voice cold as steel. "One man turned our fleet into dust. But this is not defeat. This is transformation." He turned toward a massive structure behind him, a dark machine pulsing with strange energy. "Project Oblivion," he whispered. "The humans call themselves unstoppable. We'll show them what true destruction means." His second-in-command looked uncertain. "But sir, that weapon was forbidden even by the Council." "The Council is dead," Vurok growled. "We are the last of the Dreth, and we will rise again." The machine roared to life. Energy beams spun around it, shaking the entire base. Vurok smiled cruelly. "Humanity thinks they've seen war. They've seen nothing." Back on the Resolute, human scientists were decoding the remains of Dreth technology. The wreckage from the battle revealed strange patterns, fragments of code and unknown energy readings. Dr. Havers, the chief scientist, stood before Elias and the Admiral. "Captain, we found something disturbing in their systems. The Dreth were developing a superweapon, something capable of destroying entire planets in one strike." Elias's jaw tightened. "And you think Vurok has it?" The scientist nodded. "If he's still alive, he'll use it." The Admiral paced the room. "If this weapon is real, we can't wait for him to strike. We have to find him first." Elias looked at the holographic map. Red markers showed Dreth-controlled space, now smaller but still vast. He pointed to one sector, a cold, empty zone near the galactic edge. "He'll hide there. That's where they build their forbidden weapons. The Black Systems." The Admiral studied him. "You sound sure." Elias met his gaze. "Because that's what I do." 2 days later, a small human task force left the main fleet. 3 ships, the Resolute, the Falcon, and the Iron Dawn, jumped into hyperspace, heading straight for the Dretha's last stronghold. Inside the command room, the crew moved with tense silence. Arya glanced at Elias. "You really think we'll find him?" Elias smiled faintly. "No. He'll find us." And he was right. Moments after they dropped out of hyperspace, alarms screamed. Dreth ships appeared from the darkness, smaller, faster, and more dangerous than before. Their hulls glowed with red energy lines. "Ambush!" shouted the helmsman. Elias grabbed the command console. "Brace for impact. Shields up." The Dreth ships opened fire. Plasma bolts smashed against the Falcon, tearing through its engines. The ship exploded in a burst of fire. "Falcon down!" yelled an officer. Elias' voice stayed calm. "Return fire. Aim for their cores. They're using unstable tech. Hit it hard enough and they'll burn themselves." Human railguns roared. Missiles streaked through the void. 2 Dreth vessels exploded instantly, their own weapons overloading. But it wasn't enough. A massive Dreth cruiser appeared behind them, larger than any seen before. It pulsed with red energy, surrounded by lightning. Arya stared at it in horror. What is that? Elias narrowed his eyes. That's not a ship. That's the weapon. Inside that monstrous vessel, Commander Vurok stood before a glowing core of dark energy. You took everything from me, human, he growled. Now I return the favor. He pressed a command on his console. The weapon's energy spiked, forming a black beam of compressed power. It locked onto a distant planet, a small human colony. Elias watched from the Resolute as the beam fired. The colony vanished in a single flash of light. Millions gone, in seconds. The bridge went silent. Even the Admiral's voice cracked. Dear God! Elias clenched his fists. He's not after victory anymore, he said. He wants extinction. Arya looked at him. Then what do we do? Elias turned toward the burning Drethship on the screen. His eyes were cold now, calm, steady, unshakable. We end him. Right here. He activated the ship's manual override, locking the Resolute's course directly toward Vurok's vessel. The Admiral shouted, Kane, what are you doing? Elias didn't answer. All power to engines. Load every torpedo we have. Arya stepped forward. Sir, that's suicide. Elias looked at her, and a small, tired smile crossed his face. Maybe. But someone has to remind him why you never cross humanity. The Resolute surged forward, engines blazing. The Dreth cruiser turned its weapons, preparing to fire again. In the blackness of space, two titans charged toward each other, humanity's last defender, and the monster who wanted to end them. The collision course was set. And the universe held its breath. Space burned. Two ships, the TDS Resolute and the Dreth supercruiser Scourge Reborn, charged toward each other through the darkness. Both vessels were damaged, bleeding fire and metal, but neither slowed. It was not a battle anymore. It was vengeance. Inside the Resolute, red lights flashed, alarms screamed. Smoke filled the corridors, but the crew held their ground. Every man and woman knew what was coming, and not one of them ran. Engines at full power, shouted the helmsman. Shields at 12%. Arya yelled over the noise. Elias gripped the rail near the main console. His eyes were locked on the burning enemy ship ahead. Keep her steady, he said calmly. We're not dying yet. The Admiral turned to him. Captain, if we hit that thing head-on, we're finished. Elias shook his head. Not if we hit the right spot. He pointed to the holographic display, a pulsing red core deep inside the Drethship. That's their weapon reactor. Hit it, and the whole thing goes down. The Admiral hesitated, then gave a grim nod. Then we aim for the heart. On board the Scourge Reborn, Commander Vurok stood in the center of the control deck, surrounded by glowing red light. His armor gleamed with dark energy, his eyes burning like twin suns. The human comes again, said one of his lieutenants, voice trembling. He's not retreating. Of course not, Vurok growled. That's what makes him dangerous. He stepped closer to the viewing screen, where the Resolute raced toward him like a comet. He wants to end me. Good. Let him try. He raised his clawed hand. All weapons, fire. Green plasma beams erupted from the Drethship, tearing through the void. The Resolute shook violently as multiple hits smashed into its hull. Shields failing, shouted Arya. We've lost the port thrusters. Elias held onto the console. Compensate with secondary power. Redirect all energy to forward shields. Sir, that'll burn the engines. Then we burn them, he said. We only need one shot. The two ships drew closer. Human fighters launched from the Resolute, swarming around the Dreth cruiser like angry wasps, dodging plasma fire and missiles. They hit the enemy hull, one after another, tearing open cracks in its armor. Fighters report critical damage, came the call from comms. Elias' voice was steady. Tell them to keep pressure on that core. No one backs down. Arya looked at him, her voice shaking. You really think this will work? Elias met her eyes. No, he said quietly. I know it will. The bridge shook again, this time from a direct hit. Sparks exploded from the ceiling. One officer fell, another screamed in pain. Smoke filled the air. Evacuate the lower decks, shouted the admiral. Elias stepped forward. No. Everyone stays. We finish this together. Inside the Scourge Reborn, Vurock watched with a twisted grin as the human ship burned. See them break, he said softly. See how fragile their courage truly is. But then his smile faded. The human ship wasn't slowing down. Even as pieces of it broke away, it kept coming, straight for his core. What is he doing? One Dreth officer gasped. Vurock's eyes widened. No. The Resolute fired its final barrage, every missile, every torpedo, every railgun shell it had left. The explosions tore through the Dreth cruiser's outer hull. The Scourge Reborn staggered, its weapon systems flickering. Elias leaned toward the screen. Now. He hit the final command, a direct jump. The Resolute's hyperdrive roared to life, propelling it forward at impossible speed, straight into the Dreth ship's heart. The impact was like a sun being born. Light consumed everything. The Resolute and Scourge Reborn vanished inside a storm of energy, their cores colliding. The Dreth weapon overloaded, collapsing under its own power. Space itself trembled as the explosion tore across the system. When the light faded, there was only silence. Fragments of metal floated where two warships once stood. The Dreth fleet's command ship, gone. The weapon, gone. And somewhere in that wreckage, the man who started it all, gone too. Hours later, in orbit above Earth, Terran Command received the signal. Static filled the speakers, then a faint voice broke through. This is Resolute. The voice was weak but unmistakable. Elias Kane. Captain. You're alive, cried the comms officer. Elias coughed, his voice faint but steady. The Dreth are finished. Vurock is gone. Tell command. He paused, breathing hard. Tell them humanity stands. The signal cut out. Weeks passed. Across the galaxy, Dreth colonies fell silent. Their fleets scattered. The war was over. Humanity had won, but at a cost that would echo for generations. In the Terran Hall of Honor, a monument stood under the stars. At its center was a simple plaque. Captain Elias Kane. One man fell, and the universe learned why you never cross humanity. Beneath the plaque, a small light flickered, the eternal flame of remembrance. And somewhere, deep in uncharted space, among drifting wreckage and forgotten stars, a faint heartbeat still echoed. The story wasn't over. Not yet. Years passed since the final battle. The stars that once burned with war were silent now, cold witnesses to the price of peace. Humanity stood taller than ever before, but the scars of that war remained, on planets, on ships, and in the hearts of those who survived. The Terran Union had grown vast. The Dreth Empire was no more. What was left of their people had surrendered, their fleets dismantled, their colonies brought under human control. Yet, no one celebrated victory with joy. Too much had been lost. Admiral Arya Sol walked through the Hall of Honor, her steps echoing softly. The monument stood before her, the statue of a man in a captain's coat, one hand reaching toward the stars. Below it, the plaque read, Captain Elias Kane. The man who showed the universe that humanity does not fall quietly. Arya's eyes softened. You always said the stars would test us, she whispered. You were right. But you also showed us how to fight back. Far across the galaxy, deep within a nebula where light could barely reach, a broken Dreth signal flickered to life. Static, then fragments of sound, an echo of something impossible. Is anyone there? It was a voice. Human. Weak, distorted but human. The signal bounced across empty space until it reached a Terran listening post on the edge of known space. The officer on duty stared at the waveform on his screen, his heart racing. "No way," he murmured. "It can't be." He ran a trace, checking the coordinates. The origin was inside the wreckage field of the Scourge Reborn. The same place Captain Elias Kane's ship had been lost. The officer slammed the comm switch. "Command, this is Station 9. We're picking up a signal from the Resolute. Repeat, we have a human signal from the Resolute." Hours later, the Terran flagship Vigilant jumped into the nebula. The air was thick with ion storms, and the scanners barely worked. Still, they searched. "Anything?" asked Admiral Arya, now older, her hair streaked with silver. "Faint readings, Admiral," said the sensor chief. "Energy signatures consistent with old Terran tech, definitely from the Resolute." Arya's heart pounded. "Bring us closer." The Vigilant drifted through the mist until its floodlights caught something metallic. Broken hulls, shattered plating, and there, half buried in debris, the name still visible, TDS Resolute. They launched a boarding team. The corridors were frozen in silence, walls scorched from fire. As they moved through the wreckage, they found what they didn't expect: systems still faintly active. A pod. Still sealed. Still humming. "Admiral," said the team leader over comms, "we found a stasis chamber. It's human." Arya's breath caught. "Open it carefully." The chamber hissed open, releasing a cloud of vapor. Inside lay a man, older, scarred, but unmistakable. His eyes opened slowly, pale light reflecting in them. "Where am I?" he whispered. Arya's voice trembled. "Captain Elias Kane. You're home." Word spread across the galaxy faster than light. The man who sacrificed everything for humanity had returned. When Elias stood before the Terran Senate, the entire chamber went silent. He looked older, thinner, his voice low but powerful. "You all think we won that war," he said. "But war isn't won by destroying your enemy. It's won by surviving them." He looked out at the gathered leaders, humans, Dreth refugees, and other species now allied with Earth. "We proved our strength," he continued. "Now we must prove our wisdom. Because if we become what we fought, then humanity truly falls." The chamber erupted in applause, not out of pride, but out of understanding. Years later, children would visit the Hall of Honor and hear the story. They would learn how one man's defiance saved their world. How one ship faced an empire. How one human fell, and taught the universe fear. Elias Kane never returned to command again. He lived quietly on Mars, among veterans and families who had lost everything. But sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the stars. Arya once visited him there. They stood in silence, watching the red horizon. "You changed everything, Elias," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "No," he said. "We did." He turned his gaze to the stars one last time. "The universe learned to fear us. Now it's time it learned to trust us." Decades later, when Elias finally passed away, his funeral was held in orbit above Earth. Thousands of ships filled the sky, lights glowing like fireflies across the dark. The message broadcast across every human world was simple. Here lies Elias Kane. One man fell. And the universe remembered why you never cross humanity. As the ships dimmed their lights in his honor, a whisper carried through the stars. And somewhere, beyond human space, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, a Dreth child looked up and asked his mother, "Is it true that one human made the stars burn?" His mother smiled softly. "Yes," she said. "And because of him, they shine for us all." Sparkles the end.